What's with the photo?
Shoot the other day, but from a Zulu, Fumbu, Umzageze. Ubuyani. Okay, right, start walking. Yalungus are riding left and right. Yabo, following the signs. Maga figure out since Barababa man. Korkot Loblu and all Vulalit. Superhero ke manje uyazwa obviously mkhulu akutshela mfana ikholi yasekhaya.
It's a distraction to be made to celebrate Women's Day because you now sikumele ulinde that Women's Day. It's like if you can check mainstream media now, and I'm so grateful for the for social media now because we've got your platforms.
This is the Hustlers Corner.
Brothers and sisters, hustlers and squatters, welcome to another episode. A quick one, go straight to the Chop Sun and click the like button. 1, 2, 3. Click. Thank you very much, guys, for subscribing. Click the notification bell and do not forget to switch that on. The notification bell is important so you know whenever we are dropping brand new videos. Thank you so much once again. We're excited. We are celebrating Women's Month. Women's Day is tomorrow. And today we've decided with Penyo to bring our sister back. But before we get the show started, let me tell you guys, there are some links there that take you to Penyol's YouTube channel. Click and subscribe. That take you to my personal YouTube channel. Click and subscribe. That take you to real estate property investment opportunities with Ekasi Noble Property Development. Click there and go see opportunities in case you're interested in property. And for those that are interested in learning crypto, we've decided to partner up with Crypto University and Yellow Card. So there's a link there that takes you to some free crypto courses because we've decided somebody has to pay for it. So you guys can study for free. Penyo, good to see you again, my brother.
Happy Women's Month to you. Thina sinama oledi yasithanda kakhulu.
Yasihleko sisimandisi.
Happy Women's Month. I don't know if you forgot Mofire merchandise.
Oh, Mofire merchandise link as well, yeah. For those that want some Mofire merch. Actually, we've got some good, but I'll tell you just now.
No, thank you. I'd like to welcome back Powerhouse. Her interview was absolutely insane. Educated so many people. I've been honored to meet her, to get to know her, to learn from her. I'm excited to have her back, and I think I wouldn't have asked for a better person to come and have a chat with us for Women's Month.
She gave us one of the biggest episodes.
She did. Is she blushing? Are you blushing?
She likes saying Mdala. You're not old. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Sis Mandisa Mashiko. Did you get some feedback from the previous episode we did?
I still get it. People ask me for the full clip. I'm like, no, go to YouTube and find it. Like they want me to provide it. And then Abanye might say, there's a guy I met the other day. He's like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know about you. And then when I saw that, I started Googling you. I'm like, okay, okay, whatever. But yeah, it's been great. The feedback has been great. I think more than anything, people appreciate, for some reason, the discussion, the actual content, the discourse. And I think it feels like there's some kind of thirst out there or some kind of vacuum. But like I said before, it shocks me that people say that because the internet is like there.
It's scary, and I'll tell you from my side, we take things for granted. There are so many South Africans that are not politically literate that, yes, didn't know you until the episode, which scares me. But to exactly what you're saying, there's so much thirst for knowledge, for history, and you have that in abundance. I've said to you before that you're a walking library, and we need to keep bringing you back because the youth in South Africa needs you, especially now.
That's why I keep making that youth comment, the age comment. The youth in South Africa needs you.
It's true.
Why do they need me? Like, I'm old.
You're not old. Stop it. You're knowledgeable. You're wise, and you have a lot to teach. And we have a lot to learn. All of us, never mind age, all of us.
Look, I think there's a lot of us out there, yourselves, right? There's a lot of people out there who have got immense amounts of experience. Exposure, knowledge to all sorts of things, contemporary things. I mean, the other day, I can't remember at which platform we were discussing, I don't know where we were, but we were talking about the 1980s. And I happened to mention to this person that year, 1983, when the schools were shut down during the heightening phase of the anti-apartheid movement. One of the things was to boycott the Bantu education system. And a lot of people actually, I mean, there was a guy there. Where were we? It was at his thing. Yes, I was with him. And this young man was saying, he started asking us to talk more about it. And I was like, why? And this guy's probably like, what, 30, in his 30s?
He's in his mid-30s.
Mid-30s, like 35. He says he has no idea that in 1983, the year he was born, he says he was actually born in 1983, that in 1983 there were no, there was no schooling in the townships at least. And I was like, why would you not know that? Like, that was the year you were born. I mean, didn't your mother tell you what was going down, in her life, or your dad? We always put so much burden on mothers to actually educate children. But yeah, I think that actually made me realize that, okay, we have a lot of problems. And the biggest part of our problem is that politically and socially, we don't understand, many of us don't understand why we are where we are at now in our lives, whether it's because of the economic system, which is capitalism, or colonialism, so colonial capitalism, or and the ensuing race relations, in South Africa that then became so toxic, and of course the economic and social dispossession that resulted from that, but also just generally like the meat of the eras that we went through in our struggles as African people to basically to rediscover ourselves, who we are, in the process of building a life that we can be more in control of, as opposed to being a nannied people that basically, which is what we were during colonial apartheid and before that. And so, yeah, you're right. I think we probably need to do something about it. I mean, somebody needs to do something about it. We can't have young people who don't know that 35 years ago, there was an entire population, of Africans, like the majority of the population, that was basically, whose education was held back for an entire year because they were contributing towards, their own liberation. And then today we listen to people who have a nerve to tell us how they freed us. We need to remind them that we didn't free us. We sacrificed our lives, many of us. There were people, I don't know if we had this conversation as well in that conversation. And I liked to bring it up because it's a very critical thing. It brought a lot of torture and trauma to many families. There were families from the black middle class base I think from the late 70s or early 80s, who decided to boycott their mortgage bonds. If you'd remember, in the 80s, we had what they used to call those mutual banks that used to just give out bonds, mortgage bonds to black people in the townships when the middle class areas of the townships were starting to burgeon, right? So your Diepkloof extension, your Spruit View, Ewit Bank, where I stayed, we used to call it Tycoon Village.
Hospital View at Tembisa.
Exactly. So in Gugulethu, Khayelitsha, all the South African towns outside of the Bantustan arrangements, PE had Dantsane and a few other towns like that, East London, every sort of Bloemfontein, Durban, Pietermaritzburg, all the major towns and sort of metro areas that we know as metro areas today, black people got together and decided to boycott their mortgage bonds as part of the anti-apartheid, to contribute towards the struggle as workers. It was mainly nurses, government employees like police officers, nurses, teachers, and then people who were, working in the private sector, engineers at Eskom, believe it or not, there were black engineers, artisans, also so-called black middle class demographic that wanted to do their bit to contribute, which is why I always say, Agnamuntu who liberated us. We got this freedom from our own sacrifices, children sacrificing their education, stone throwers doing their bit, middle class workers, everybody pushed. And you know what happened in 1994? These people who are governing now, and particularly Nelson Mandela, made a commitment to say, because those people got into trouble with their banks, I think it was Abu Sambo then, and those banks, Trust Bank.
I've heard those stories. I've heard those Sambo mortgage bond stories. I've heard them.
It's real. And it's a tragedy. It's the biggest tragedy.
To this day, there's people that are fighting those same things because a lot of people are overcharged. Back in the day, and it hasn't been fixed by the banks.
Let me tell you, it's a struggle that I actually wanted to pursue at some point. But when I started digging into it, it's so massive. It requires lawyers. It requires to go to the Constitutional Court. It requires, people with the organizational skills to bring those people together and really. But the long and the short of it is that what then ended up happening is that the banks held off from repossessing those people's homes, right? Because they didn't pay. But what they did, the ANC then made a commitment to say all the people who participated, Bonabo, Hospital View, those areas, it was mainly those kinds of areas because that's where the first mortgage bonds started in the Black Townships, if you remember.
Yeah.
They then made a promise, the ANC, to say, no, Ninga Warshegi, as soon as we take over. And I think this was all leading up to maybe between 1991 when the black political parties were unbanned. That's when obviously now, and the exiles returning back to South Africa from wherever the hell they went to. And I'm very passionate about that because but sometimes I just feel like telling them to go back because we are held at gunpoint now because people decided to leave the country when the fight was here. But nonetheless, they then promised that they'll reimburse those people, not only reimburse them, but compensate them even for the sacrifice, right? And cover the interests, the what do you call it, the interest rate, the surcharges that come as a result of you then not paying your bills. Not only did that not happen, those people were completely, rejected. I mean, with any overtures on their part to try and reach out to, let's say, the Department of now called Human Settlements in 94, it was called Housing. Basically, they were just like what happens to all of us when we try and make joint contributions towards developing this country, working with the South African government. They reject, and basically, throw people to the curb. And all those families, a lot of them, there were lots of suicide stories. A lot of them became basically homeless because the banks then made moves and repossessed their homes. And every time these people would say, but we were participating in a political boycott to help liberate ourselves because we knew that the whites at the time were not going to feel the pressure until they felt it in their pockets. Because that was part of the whole, it actually coincided with COSATU's establishment in 1987. So all those labor boycotts, it was famously called the rolling mass action, if you remember that term, right? It was famously called rolling mass action because it was a strategy to stagger the pressure against the apartheid government. So then it's to boycott the financial services. And then there was also massive boycotts. You remember, we couldn't buy food from white, mainly, from towns, because those were all obviously white-owned and white-controlled and white-operated, those businesses. We couldn't buy from the grocery stores. That's how the Indian retail sector then started to also, it was already there. There were always Indians next to black townships, Indian townships. And so that's when the Indian retail business started to pick up.
Yeah.
So every town you go to, there's a massive Indian business that's running parallel. The mainstream economy of that town. It was given an impetus by those consumer boycotts because it was clearly understood that until we make generally the establishment at the time, which was understood as being, the National Party Afrikaner-run government, until we take the fight to their pockets, they are not going to eventually buckle. And then eventually all those massive boycotts, consumer boycotts, resulted in the CODESA negotiations, right? And so it's very tragic because, and I can go on and on about this. Again, the same middle class base that was working in government, whether in the Bantustans or under the South African administration. Also, young people don't understand the difference between the Bantustan administrations and the South African.
Young people don't know what that is at all.
But what are they learning then? So my last point was that there was also a professional, there was some organized boycotts from the state employees who were sort of in your middle class base, not your blue collar workers like your teachers, your nurses again, and then government administrators. And they under apartheid, you can relate to the term apartheid wage gap, right? We still have it, an apartheid wage gap, and we also have a gender wage gap, right, which goes on the back of the apartheid wage gap. And by the way, this is a global phenomenon. It plays itself out everywhere in the world, really. The gender and the gender wage gap,
okay.
the gender wage gap, But in South Africa, obviously, on top of it, you have
There's
to add
also
the apartheid issue, because the racial wage gap, So where black men earn less than everybody else, and then black women earn less than black men. And so there were those structures of income were impacting our pension funds wabazali bethu nabogogo bethu at the time. The ANC promised again to correct that from 1994. It still hasn't been corrected. Today, there are organizations, I know, you know, right?
Yes.
Her mom used to be a nurse, a matron, I think. She runs an organization, Mrs. Mutsonyan. She runs an organization of ex-nurses. I don't know if she involves the teachers as well and the police officers, but I know ex-nurses who are still fighting to get their regularized pension, which the ANC promised them before 94 to secure their votes. So there's a lot
that are still hanging.
that are outstanding.
There's a gentleman, elderly gentleman, Emerald Van Sale on Twitter, who takes on a lot of these fights, the Sambo cases.
Yes.
Because I think some of the big banks, I don't know if it's one bank in particular or a couple of them, they took on some of these bonds.
Investec is one of them.
And they've never sorted out these things. So Emerald Van Sale fights some of those.
Wow.
And it's a challenge to specifically young people. Go and sit with your elders. Go and look at their home loans if they're still paying them off to go and calculate. If you don't know, take those statements and go to the bank and or sit with someone, one of your friends, abafundile, and say, can we please go through this so I can see if my parents were never cheated. Emerald Van Sale, I think Ukadi from the EFF is also, I think they're working in partnership. He's come in as a legal assistant to those fights as well. It's very tragic what's happened and a lot of these promises that haven't been fulfilled. I believe to this day, there's still APLA soldiers, the military arm of EPAC,
Who are in jail.
that are still in jail,
Yeah.
even though other people were forgiven at the TRC. There's still black liberation soldiers that are still languishing in jail to this day that have never been freed. And clearly there are so many other things that have not been resolved. And if it's not going to be our parents, because now their knowledge is limited, we as the youth need to be educated, informed, and then we need to go and sit with our parents and say, please tell us the stories. There might be something in your history that was never resolved that we need to resolve on your behalf. Because sesifundile, sesiyazi, sizokhuluma mhlambe no Sbu, no Penwell, no Mandisa, and see how we can sort that out. I wanted to ask now, since we're celebrating Women's Month and Women's Day tomorrow, what is the back end of why we're here? Why are we celebrating the 9th of August? What's the significance?
So for me, I always find it narrow to focus on 1956, 9 August, when Abolilian Ngoyi and company, protested against the pass laws as women. And really, I think it was one of the biggest gatherings of that era, because it's a little bit of, what shall I call it? It's an anticlimax. Shall I call it an anticlimax? Because the real struggle was really about freedom of movement, number one, and of course, general freedoms, but primarily freedom of movement resulting from the land dispossession, which was formalized in 1913, right? So obviously you need to imagine as well as a human being, just imagine we need to imagine our ancestors' trajectory from, let's use 1652 as a date in South Africa, because North Africa and West Africa and other East Africa, they all have different dates. But you need to imagine from 1652 each century, then you go to 1752, 1852, 1952, etc., right? What has been happening. So ultimately, all of this culminated in the 1913 Land Act. And it's not a coincidence when we talk about the fact that the older black people are perpetually, I want to be very clear on this one. Black men are our biggest Achilles heel in Africa. You guys are the biggest sellouts up to today, from the time Abelungu befika la. Obviously, before that, we had our own equilibrium where women were much more respected, and actually we ran a relatively matriarchal society, by and large, where men understood the true value of women, especially in Africa, because I like to repeat this. In Africa, we really had equality, and I want to challenge anyone from Europe especially. I would prefer a European to challenge me. Because I don't
they're
like
the ones that tell you that you were oppressed.
I don't like it when black people try to defend the trajectory of colonialism, because all of us were victims. But here's the thing. Before they arrived, black women were mainly partaking in agricultural activities. food production was really in our hands. That's why even I think the last conversation we had, I was explaining to you guys how I grew up no koko amilima. And all of you could relate to that. You can all relate to our koko benu or our koko benu if you are too young to have a koko who could have lived in that era.
By the way, shout out for the bananas. Siyabonga. Challenge ukuphuza iphuzo, but siyabonga neyithelo.
They were also donated to me, so I donated them to you guys.
No, siyabonga.
Thank you. So I'm going about it the long way, but the long and the short of it is that pre-colonial times in Africa, we had a much better equilibrium, a much better sense of respecting one another as men and women and then children, etc., etc. We had a hierarchy in our society that we appreciated. You can't be wiser than an older person. It's a fact, you know. But what is critical about what I'm saying is that I'm trying to build a case for the point I'm going to make about 1956 and 1913, is that when you can even look at Nigeria. You can use Nigeria as an example. There was an organization in Nigeria in the early 1900s called the Lagos Women Market Association, right? Because that is the evidence that tells you that much earlier on, even before colonizers started doing their slave trading and dispossessing land and initiating and really funding wars in Africa to basically stoke conflict amongst the different nations of Africa because they wanted to steal amidst all that chaos. Same thing that they're doing now, but they found us economically engaged as women. We were farming, we were fishing, we were mining, we were in manufacturing, we were producing clothes, our own clothes, we were producing, carpentry, senza mat. I know this because there was no gender around who's going to do woodwork. I don't know if people know that. There wasn't. Tina and the bunch education. There was no gender. If I wanted bengifuna amacansi or ngifuna amamet or baskets, it just ended up so that most boys would want to go because then you have to go to the river to get this plant and then dry it out and make the actual textile. Now, back to the South African Land Act issue in relation to what the question you were asking me. For me, I think it's a misnomer and it smacks of some kind of what do you call it? So sort of cheap PR slanting, and PR is my trade. I respect it a lot. I hate it when people abuse it. To focus on 1956, because the real point is that, for instance, Charlotte Maxeke, I think she was already late by 1956. She initiated a march in 1913, immediately after the Boers and the British got together and agreed to form the Union, which was in 1910. And then leading up to and then no wonder for wonders, 1912, who forms an organization. Let's not talk about them. Exactly a year
we
later.
We have to talk about them because there's people that won't connect the dots.
They need to connect it for themselves.
So the ruling party was formed.
Yes. And then is it a coincidence that a year after they were formed, the Boers and the British have enough gall to then pass the Land Act after a so-called, anti-land disposition organization is formed amongst all Africans, bringing all nationalities of Africa together, of South Africa together to precisely fight also amongst, to also stop the tribalistic and divided fights against the colonial onslaught. It's not a coincidence. The only people who stood up and made a mark against, and made their voices heard and physically protested and did many other things were women led by Charlotte Maxeke. In 1913, they marched to Bloemfontein. For me, that is a better, trajectory to consider when you consider this resistance organized, its defiance, which was more tangible, which was more genuine, which was more realistic, which was more practical, which was more necessary than the 1956 one, which is 66 years ago. I think that we were working it out earlier. The 109-year-old battle is the more radical one for us. If we want to be genuine and legitimate, we need to be honest Like how I was explaining about, the anti-apartheid struggle, how it culminated into these massive consumer boycotts that cost people their lives and their monies and their right to their properties. And you can imagine how many families got divorced and fought and all sorts of things as a result of that. And then after that, the people who claim to have liberated us, just basically throw their hands in the air and abafuna ukwazi lutho. By the way, that housing thing, it's Investec that is sitting with that book. I know because I tried to do a lot of research, like I said earlier, to try and take on that struggle. But when I realized it's going to cost a lot, I basically just, suspended it. But the point
sorry to interrupt. The reason they marched to Bloemfontein was because that's where the British and the Afrikaners sat to decide on how the country is going to be moving forward.
At the time...
Because people would ask, why not Pretoria? Why Bloem?
No, because Bloemfontein was the headquarters of government then, especially the Afrikaner government, which was more dominant than the British government. I think the British government was in charge of Natal at the time and parts of Transvaal, but the dominant government was and also that's where the Supreme Court of Appeals sits, and it was basically the legal headquarters of South Africa.
And it still is.
Yeah. And so, but I think there were key government entities that were sitting there. I could be wrong. I think there could have been a prime minister or president that had an office there at the time, because Bloemfontein was more significant than Cape Town at the time. And I think their parliament was there, at their own parliament. But also what is important to appreciate is that we should have been smart enough at that point to realize that, the British and the Afrikaners are actually, as much as they fight between each other, right, or amongst each other, but they're a lot more coordinated when it comes to things of common interest. They had their fights. That's when the union was the first real indication of the coordination of colonial forces, however much they may have personally felt about each other. But they were smart enough, unlike us, even today in 2022, especially Tina Abantu Besifazane. We have not yet figured out how to fight, issues that are more macro in scale, that affect all of us, and not personal, private issues, right? We just don't know how to rise above our own pettiness. And so for me, Charlotte Maxeke was really and her movement and her march to Bloemfontein. By the way, the past laws were already activated then. It's just that they were not, in 1913, women were not yet expected to carry amapas. In fact, black women, you see, because the whole purpose of the colonial, of Europeans settling in South Africa, that's another thing that many young people don't understand. The reason we have a population of, I think at some point it was 10 million, I don't know what it is now, a white population of between 5 and 7 million, is because whites, Europeans settled in South Africa, unlike the other parts of Africa. And so because Europeans came here to settle, they had to, and you can only imagine the rest of it, right? Fill the gaps for yourself. They had to study us thoroughly to get a pure, to understand exactly how our science works, our medicine, our education, all our cultural activities, our rites of passage, as boys and girls as we grow up, how we manage our families, etc., how we manage even our judiciary, our justice system, and basically just how we cooperate with one another, how we farm, how we produce food, how we basically live our entire lives, and then hit us where it hurts the most with the land. And so for me, marching against IPAS in 1956. It was critical, of course. You cannot downplay it at all. All I'm saying is that let's understand where it came from and why. The women, by the way, they were not part of the ANC. Charlotte Maxeke was not yet a member of the ANC.
It was her own movement.
Yes, it was her. She was already mobilizing women around issues of migrant labor, the effects of migrant labor. So I think the first gold mine was in Barberton, right, in the 1800s.
I don't know.
I also don't know.
It was, people think it was Gauteng. No, it wasn't. It was Barberton. Barberton in Barberton, where I went to school. In Mpumalanga, yes. Eastern Transvaal, as it was called. That's where the first gold mining activity actually happened. For whatever reason, they decided not to mine there further, but of course there is still gold there. In fact, there's a gold belt that runs through Mpumalanga, that part of Mpumalanga, Inyuge, is izodlule eKuruleni, Sobo Wheatbank, Iyanyuka. It's a gold belt. And then it goes up to here and then it goes to Zimbabwe. There's a lot more gold that actually hasn't been mined as yet for whatever reason.
Snap.
Maybe biodiversity reasons.
Zamazama.
How's your bankeda?
Abo Zamazama, they only go as far as where the gold has already been mined, because
Yeah.
then they follow those.
They follow the mine shafts that have been closed.
Yes. Because obviously to dig much deeper is expensive and they might not have the money. But there are gold reserves in the country that are, closer to the surface like they are in Zimbabwe. But the really, I mean, to close off what I was saying is that I just think that we end up being managed, discourse managed to suit a certain agenda.
Miseducation.
Exactly. To basically drive some obscure, agenda to control and to basically program us to believe that thina bantu besifazane, we only do things when, because landelela amadoda. And history proves. I was mentioning the Lagos Women Fresh Produce Market Women Association in Lagos. I think in 1920, that actually staged a protest against colonizers, British colonizers, who were obviously, I think by then the slave trade had sort of like died down in terms of its physical vestiges. But of course, the after effects, and they protested because the British, you must understand, Europeans imported sexist, misogyny and gender, stereotyping and discrimination against women. They created it in Europe and then they brought it here, because when they came here, they just couldn't understand with who allow women to mine with them, to farm with them, to be involved in the production process, because that's economically empowering stuff. We need women to be domesticated at home. So they had already domesticated their women. We are even leading armies. Are leading armies.
Queen Zinga.
And then there's the Benin, the all-women army. Unzingage was leading an army of both men and women. Then there were all-women armies, who in fact are the only armies in Africa that beat colonial armies, like literally. And like literally, whenever a woman was leading an army across all of Africa, those battles, the Africans won. And in most cases, the black men that were actually, the African men that were leading those armies before Kutata over Labafazi had actually collapsed and they needed a break. And I mean, you can imagine how tiring it was.
I'm saying, is that the reason why you are saying off air that you are against Women's Day? Number one. Number two, don't you feel or think we should actually celebrate the day because of its significance and the opportunity that it brings for young people to be taught about our history?
May I please jump in before you answer? I just want to give the backstory to your question for those that may not know.
Yeah.
The Women's March was a march that took place on the 9th of August, 1956, the 56th date in Pretoria, not Bloem, in South Africa. The march's aims were to protest the introduction of apartheid pass laws for black women in 1952 and the presentation of a petition to the then Prime Minister J.G. Strydom. The lead figures were Helen Joseph, Rahima Musa, Sophia Williams de Bruyn, Lillian Ngoyi, and then there was a petition. So Usbu is asking your question, why are you against Women's Day, for example, and you've already highlighted the 1913 significance, but please, may you continue.
It's not that I'm against it, Putusbu, more than the fact that I'm against the programming, the deliberate exclusion of very critical information that predates 1956. To contextualize so that young people can also and especially women must be able to contextualize what has been happening. It's, all of us should be doing our own research, try and find out from the elders. Like I said, there's young people who don't know what happened in the 80s, let alone the 50s. And so...
Which is just now.
Which is like when they were born. Like, why would you not want to know what was happening in society when you were born? It's important for you to contextualize that. It's also important so that you start to understand why it's also more important for you to become active as a citizen, in the governing of your own affairs. not just in business because you need to make money there, but also in politics, because in any event, the economy and the political space work hand in hand. The government or parliament is used to establish laws and set regulations that suit business by and large. That's why we find ourselves as women not understanding why are there so many laws that are essentially anti-women, or the absence of laws that should be pro-women. Why do we have such an anti-womanist government? Why do we have such an anti-feminist government? Why do we have such an anti-feminist economy? Why is the economy so masculine? Once you start to understand the trajectory of, let's say, the last 300 years at least, confine yourself to there, then you begin to understand, this thing was actually a deliberate attempt to subjugate women. Like I was explaining, European men, when they decided to colonize, they deliberately suppressed women and studied. That is why they started Ngamadota, right? When the first gold rush happened in Barberton, and workers, we can discuss even the issue of mining and the colonial influence in mining and the imperialist, capitalist influence in mining, and how it got to be what it is today, where you find mines traditionally used to employ abantu who are not from the area, not just from outside of South Africa, just not from the locality. And why that is a deliberate attempt to actually kill the local economy, right? There's a whole strategy around that. But the point I was making to come
with
back
no beneficiation.
Because mawuphuma kude uzolwa kanjani. And mawuhlala endaweni, you know your terrain, you know your area. It's not going to be easy for someone to abuse you. So when they come, they deliberately employ people from far, because abantu abaphuma kude, they will be like, hey, I'm happy to get the hostel, I'm happy to get the salary, at least I'll have money to send home. So
psychologically very smart.
But colonialism is planned. It's deliberate. It's not like us as Africans. We just hate to plan stuff. We hate to plan. And our economic domination, because we are economically dominated, especially black women, we are highly economically dominated. When in fact this contrasts, which is why I'm answering what you were saying, it contrasts completely with who we are as a people indigenously. We are a very self-reliant people as African women, extremely self-reliant. That is why ubona ama households wethu are always held by women. Ubaba angashona agule abe ne stroke abe ne heart attack, as long as asenomama kuba nomuzi. Mama ngashona umama okanye kugula umama. In fact, there's even nina abantu besilisa kumele nizikhuze. Nani ni use ama-platforms when your voices to khuza your friends and your peers. Kunalento leyo ukuthi umuntu wesimame uma egula endlini, ubaba goes and runs and gets a younger woman immediately, or kicks her out, or just will not want to take care of his wife. It's so uncommon. I'm not saying that there aren't men who do it, but mostly that's what happens. Whereas makugula ubaba, umama has to now hold everybody up. And for me, that is actually, very abusive. Because she's expected to do this with minimal resources, And so I'm just saying that for women today, on Women's Day and Women's Month, it's okay. It's important to commemorate the critical milestones, like 1956. But what's more important is for us to just understand as women, siyeke ukulinda amadoda as mobilize and call us into a room and say, we are giving you political education. You can't give me education. It's another colonial misnomer. Lento yokuthi education is something that you sit in a classroom and get. No, education is something that you learn and you acquire yourself. Of course it must be coordinated and all of that. The coordinated part is just to teach you the principle of learning and knowing stuff and educating yourself and empowering yourself. But the real education is the stuff that you research, you verify, and you research, and you then challenge on your own, and then even to the point where you then make your own, sort of draw your own conclusions and develop an opinion. It's very important to always develop opinions and not wait for somebody, opinion leaders, to give you opinions, because then once you're more self-empowered, and it's much, much more critical for women to be self-empowered. My main objection with Women's Day, Women's Month, is that for thina abantu besifazane who are on the back foot of the economy, and find ourselves, sadly, having to beg, men to bring us into business deals, entrepreneurial projects, and there are platforms here and there and the other, give us jobs in corporate, give us jobs in government, all the way who are leading these spaces, is that it's much, much more important for us to understand, Guti, it's a distraction to be made to celebrate Women's Day. Because you now... So that Women's Day. It's like if you can check mainstream media now, and I'm so grateful for the, for social media now, because we've got your platforms, that we can use more freely without being edited so badly, If you check mainstream media, right, all of them before Women's, I did 2 interviews. There were 2 weeks ago with 2 of these TV people. Bang bathi ngizokhuluma nge-Women's Day. Like I gave them the same lecture I gave you. But what must I say?
It's very important that people understand the significance of days. Because you're very right that a lot of the days have been stolen from us. We've got a Heritage Day on the 24th of September, which a lot of people don't really know the history of that. And to what you're saying, some of these days we celebrate have got a more significant history than just saying, oh, mama, they marched for Amapas. What is the story behind that? It hurts me just listening, and it's triggering so many thoughts in my head about some of the fights we have as genders. Jobo Kulum about the fact that women were involved in the running of spaces. I mean, I was just thinking in my head, Uguti, we grew up in a time when gynecologists were men. Yes. Whereas mama no koko were the ones helping to birth babies. Like, there's a movie coming out on what you said earlier with Viola Davis leading a female army, African army. I forgot the name, if it's a woman king, very cheesy name for me. A movie that's coming out. And just the importance of discussing some of, I guess we'll call them heroes, but some of the amazing leaders we've had, female leaders in this country that, to what you're saying as a PR spin, it's almost Nelson Mandela, Mamwini. We almost don't see them as their own thing. Usbu's worked with Mam Daphne, heavyweight. But now someone will want to, when you speak about the wife of John Langalbalele Dube, it's almost like just why pega mascons when the men would meet. We almost completely take away their agency, and it hurts for me. I just, before you carry on, wanted to read a small piece, something that I also didn't know. Since we're celebrating Mamweni, we lost to Mam Zinzi Mandela, for example.
Yeah.
When you were speaking about the arts and the creative spaces, making our own beats, Dr. Esther Mahlangu,
yes,
who was robbed recently. Charlotte Maxeke was a South African religious leader, social and political activist. She was the first black woman to graduate with a university degree in South Africa, with a BSc from Wilberforce University, Ohio, in 1903. Yes. As well as the first black African woman to graduate from an American university.
Yes.
We speak about Pixley, who were the first black lawyers.
Yes.
We don't speak about these heavyweights. Yes, we name things after them, but we don't understand the significance. When you're speaking to young black girls in particular, who were there making shit shake back in the day without asking anyone for permission.
I'm so happy, actually. You remember the other day we were talking about this and I was mentioning this lady, Mametse. Mametse is, and I know she won't mind me talking about her. We had another discussion with her. She's actually a specialist in indigenous birthing and indigenous maternal health.
Till today.
She's doing her PhD with Stellenbosch, I think, University.
Okay.
She's, I don't want to talk about her stuff because I might misrepresent her.
Yeah, I get you.
But she's one of my, I'm in awe of her. I met her through Lebogang Ramafoko. Lebogang Ramafoko was the CEO of Soul City for many years. And she's now, I think, with Oxfam. So I met her through a program I was doing with another organization that Lebogang worked for. And...
Siyabonga, Sis Mandis.
Not over my head.
Thank you,
man.
Sorry, thank you.
And so I had my banana earlier. I just don't want people to think you're being
Yeah, good God,
toxic,
this is like, yeah,
being toxic
you know?
males. And
Hey, thank you for
I
mentioning
finished
that.
mine. I know, but right. Right.
Sure.
So basically, what you're saying precisely, the healthcare sector is just a topic on its own because capitalism was built on healthcare, right? You get that. The first and Mamutse will talk. She's the lady I said you need to talk to her. But you know what's amazing about her? And I'm going to go all over the place now because it's just so much. Waike is 84 or 89, somewhere there. She's just published a book.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Her mom.
That's beautiful.
Mamutse's mom.
Shout out to all older women who haven't felt like they've expired and who are still doing amazing things, going back to school, getting university
She published
degrees,
a
changing their
book
careers.
in Setswana
Beautiful.
it's a decolonization book about various forms of indigenous knowledge, spaces of indigenous knowledge, maternal health, maternal birthing. But then I think she takes it further into rites of passage for children as they grow older and why they need to have these rites of passage. And so, yeah, I mean, we were colonized using land, and then secondly food, and then thirdly health. Yeah, so I was I think I wanted to just add to what you were saying, Penuel, about the critical point you raised about, there was a time when amagaini bekwabantu besilisa, and I was trying to share with everybody that, by the way, one of those critical skills that as Black women, African women, we had was managing the entire healthcare space from when a child is born, or actually from when a woman conceives and gets pregnant. That entire space is called basically maternal health, And then I was mentioning Mama Tsilo Mutsei, whose mother has published a book in Setswana. It's a pity I won't be able to read it because I'm just not going to be able to read it.
It's a challenge to young people out there to take some of these books and translate them into as many languages as possible for the benefit of all of us.
Yeah, but to what you were basically saying about, the distraction about celebrating these days and that day, is it not weird how all these days are coincidentally around the African calendar that you guys were discussing? No Mkhulu
is.
For me, I look at all these great women, and I look at Mama Winnie.
Yes.
Mama Winnie's daughter, the late Mam Zinzi Mandela, may her soul rest in peace.
Yes, definitely.
Mam Zinzi Mandela's foundation,
yes,
which is under the leadership of Mkhulu Ntsengiza,
yes,
who is a student of Ukoko Credo Mota, may his soul rest in peace. Koko Credo Mota's dream has always been for us to liberate ourselves mentally, understand who we are, preserve our history, and celebrate ourselves. He's always wanted Inzalo Yelanga, to become one of those sports where we celebrate Inzalo Yelanga, we speak loudly about it. The international community rallies around coming here to find out the significance of it, what it means, etc. And the last time we heard Mkhulu, he spoke about that. And he did say he would like to bring that dream to life. And what had happened, which was a beautiful thing, after Osis Mandisa was here on the previous interview that we had, things sort of aligned, and Osis Mandisa came into the picture to also bring in some of her people that she knows to assist Mkhulu and the great Empire of Kemet movement to bring this thing to life. And there's been some beautiful progress that has happened, and maybe I can give it over to you to share to the people so far what has been achieved and what has been planned from the 21st of September to the 24th, which is great news.
Human collaboration.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, and it's organic.
Yes.
It's organic and natural, it's not forced. And by the way, it doesn't even have sponsors as yet, but what we've been able to do was to saying Penuel because he's been
everything.
part of it, yeah. And I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be looking, actually.
No, tell the people. Yeah, because a lot of people have been asking, guys, is it still happening? What's the date? Where do we buy the tickets? What are the packages? What should we expect, etc.
Yeah.
So basically, we've managed to package 7 different packages in relation to celebrating Inzalo Yelanga, which is the first of this African calendar sequence of events that happened astrally or
African New Year.
geologically. The African New Year, which is on the 23rd of September. Our New Year starts on the 23rd of September. And of course, Umkhulu has explained all of that. But what we've been able to come together and bring about has been an amazing, sort of refreshing, packaging of the hospitality and tourism experience in South Africa, because it actually aligns perfectly with even the change of seasons. And so the first one, which will happen in Mpumalanga, in Mbombela, at the Adams calendar spot called Inzalo Yelanga.
Now for Umkhulu, it's Adam's calendar.
I know. The thing, I didn't know whether to start with Kapsa Work or Adam's calendar. But me now, I'm not a denialist. I'm happy to embrace the colonial era because it happened. There's nothing much we can do about it. But what's beautiful is that this packaging actually gives us an opportunity now to bring people on board on a hospitality experience, on a beautiful African journey, right? To actually relearn stuff that we have been or allowed ourselves to be misinformed about. And so we've got these packages that are going to be sold through the
Great Empire of
Kemet Movement's website, which is...
By the way, guys, the link is in the description. We'll put it there. Click there. It'll take you to that website. We'll see the packages. You'll see the explanation. It starts from the 21st. We are convoying to Mpumalanga.
Yes.
Some of the people who don't have transport, there will be transport that will be provided. Some people who've got their cars will convoy to Mpumalanga on the 21st. There will be a gala dinner. And yeah,
many beautiful experiences. I mean, look,
It's a pilgrimage.
It's It's actually a pilgrimage. It falls under partly even ecotourism, cultural tourism, spiritual tourism, but it's going to be an amazing experience. We also have a Mbombela by night experience on that package, by the way, because we don't want to leave out the locals and just bring abantu bethu base Gauteng or Cape Town and Durban to come and invade Mpumalanga, and behave in a colonial way. But it's going to be a beautiful experience. We've got luxury buses that are going to be transporting us along the convoy that Upu was talking about. And so people must buy packages. I think we've given people like 6 weeks. And 6 weeks is enough time to budget or hustle the money if you don't have it. Hustle it. We're all buying our own packages as well. And it's going to be a beautiful experience. There's going to be a waterfall experience. Right there at the actual place in Inzalo Yelanga. There's going to be a night vigil. We're going to have some great artists and some wonderful DJs. And
so lindela lapha sicule
it's going to be beautiful.
It's going to be
beautiful.
Wherever Bab Credo is and all the other ancestors will be
They are going
happy.
to be so happy. In fact, we're also going to be visiting Sudwala Caves on one of the days. I think it's the Friday on the 23rd.
Friday the 23rd. Yeah.
Friday the 23rd.
Because the 24th is Saturday.
We're going to
And then
Sudwala
Sunday is
Caves.
the 25th. That's when we come back.
And then
for
Sunday we have a big bash
at the
that you need to talk about. At the
Credo Mutua Village.
Credo Mutua Village.
in
We have a
Soweto.
big party.
That is on the Sunday, the last day when we come back.
Yes.
From
So we're
Mpumalanga.
all the locals, yeah. Ama-Penny Plus, nabantu base-Joburg abangezanga nathi.
Oh, abangayanga eMpumalanga.
Shame. Kubangasali.
Ukuthi bangasali to come and enjoy the experience with us. It's going to be absolutely wonderful. And, I'm so happy and proud and honored and humbled that Ubhuti Sbu no Babu no Mkhulu Nsingiza allowed me.
No Penuel.
No, Penuel, of
put
course.
it together, yes.
No, actually, Penuel. Penuel is actually the one who allowed this entire thing. He kickstarted.
He connected everything. Yeah.
Oh yeah, all the connections because
And no put Paul Mnisi, Root Boy
no,
Paul.
yes,
Yeah.
I wanted to leave that one for last. But yeah, it's going to be amazing. The gala dinner is going to be beautiful. The theme of the gala dinner is actually African royalty, right? African royalty, not South African, royalty, African royalty. So abantu abeza ku-gala dinner can go all out. They can be as popping as they want to be. Gold is obviously the theme of the gala dinner, but of course we're not going to impose it. But I mean, African royalty is all about gold, right? Because we have abundant gold. We were talking about it earlier. And so, yeah, I can't wait. I really, I can't wait for the convoy. We have 2 pickup points. The first one is in Pretoria, and the second pickup point is in Johannesburg. And then from there, we all convoy to Mpumalanga, to Naspoti, to Mbombela.
So I wanted to pick up Penuel. Look, in a few months that we've been here, at least we're making some things happen. You remember when we started, we were like, we have to create a platform that sort of makes some sort of impact out there. And I'm glad ukuthi, that impact is slowly starting to be seen. I'm seeing more and more podcasts move towards these types of conversations. I'm seeing these types of intelligent conversations happen more and more on these platforms. And I'm not entirely taking the credit for ourselves, but I do know that somehow we are sort of influencing people out there. We are influencing people to collaborate. I was just watching Abu Mekji the other day after they were here. They went on and they spoke about the episode that we all had together. And that collaborative episode, we spoke about how people out there as our audiences can support us.
Yeah.
And Mekji was saying on that episode, after that interview that they had over 100 people joining to become paying members of their podcast, and that was a collaborative effort. We also benefited because out of just that one episode, I mean, we amassed over 10,000 subscribers in 1 week, But also now even this, where Ngiza's dream was always, as the leader of the Zinzi Mandela Foundation, was always to put out work that continues to amplify Ukoko Credo Mutwa's voice. Not only him, but there's a whole lot of others, right?
Yes.
But even when he was here, Penyol, you remember, he did say he would love to see that Nzalo Elanga thing happen. He did say he doesn't know how, but he'd like for it to be brought to life. And I'm glad that now we have contributed in at least 1 cent or 2 cents contribution of our energy, our time, our connections, our intelligence, whatever it might be, to bring that to life, which is going to continue to become even a bigger event in a couple of years' time. I'm seeing it become even as big, if not bigger, than Abu Durban July and all of those types of things. Because at some point, I'm even seeing it becoming a global event that attracts people from all over the world.
Yes, because it's a pilgrimage.
Because it's African New Year.
Yes, it's a pilgrimage. And, it's got a much, much huger vision than that. And because we've got a 4-pillar, activity schedule or itinerary for the year, because Inzalo Elanga is happening in Mbombela, right, at Kapsawap. And then we go to the 23rd of December and all the critical dates that are related to the African calendar, the 21st of March and the 21st of June. And so each one of these dates, 23 September, 23 December, 21 March, 21 June, is going to be a beautiful package of celebrating. This calendar that Umkhulu Ntsingisa has now opened all of our eyes about, right, is actually a reawakening and a rebirthing opportunity for all of us to do exactly what you were saying, where we have greater collaborations. And it's also hopefully going to, ignite, an energy amongst many young people, especially females, to say, look, you don't have to wait for a bank. You don't have to wait the tenders, Like you really don't have to go and prostitute yourself for a tender.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's something that we need to talk about as women, because I think it happens to men as well, right? Because amadoda in high positions are bisexual, but nobody knows, and they sexually harass, young men to give it up so that bazobanika matenda. So we have an opportunity through the Great Empire of Kemet movement, and in the spirit of honoring Ukoko Credo Mutwa and everybody like him, Ukoko Grace Masuku.
Ukoko Grace Masuku, I've been forgetting the name.
Who's still alive and kicking.
I would like for us to go visit her.
Emuruleng. Mina ngihamba nani. Actually, angeke nimbone without me.
I want to say this, Sbu. I think you and I have spoken about. One of my latest friends and mentors spoke about the prayers that went back in the day, apartheid, colonization, slave trade, that went into the universe, and that he believes that the universe is finally answering us. I know some people believe in numbers, the aligning of maybe the numbers 2, for example. All of it seems like it's the universe collaborating, us meeting, us coming together, meeting Umkhulu Ntsingisa, our Root Boy Paul and the guys. I mean, Inzalo Elanga has got to do with the alignment of the stars as well. It is an alignment of stars, and we're seeing it. You spoke about us sitting with MacGyver and Saul. JJ Taban invited us to David Mashabe. If anything, I hope that people are learning out there the power of collaboration, seeing in real time what happens when you connect with other human beings.
Yes.
And you even remove things like gender and what, because the other important thing to what you're saying about the international community, I want white people, Indians, Chinese sort of people I want them to feel free to come and celebrate with us.
Yes.
They mustn't feel like, no, it's just for Black Africans. Because I remember Malcolm X and other people speaking about pilgrimages to Mecca
Yes.
and how it opened their minds. If you, Afrikaans, if you really feel as a true African, celebrate with us. This is when our spring is. This is when our harvest is. Come join us and let's work together. Other things we can resolve, other past pains we can try and sort out. We
Yes.
can argue and fight and hold you accountable, and you can call us names. But there are certain things when you align with nature and the universe where we can work together, and we're showing that in real time. And I'm hoping our virtual squatters, the hustlers, are watching this and they're saying, I will be involved. I will come with the guys on the 23rd of September. I want to find out about what's happening in December.
This is the Hustlers Corner.